Okay, Tov, Shavua Tov. We should hear better news. Today's daf is daf Hey. We'll start here on the bottom of daf Dalid Amid Beis. Ella Omar Shmuel, 2 lines up before the end of the Amud. So we just have to remind ourselves that Shmuel originally was understood to have said that if a person says Mudrani ani mimcha, mufrashani mimcha, muruchachni mimcha, that's not enough to generate a neder. He has to add sheni ochel loch and sheni toem loch. And the Gemara rejected that interpretation, that formulation of Shmuel, based on various brisos where it seemed to have the word osur twice. Once it's osur in the case of Mudrani mimcha, osur, and then another case of Sheni Toim Mimcha Asur, implying that Mudrani Mimcha alone in and of itself would definitely be a valid neder. So based on this, the Gemara now, El Amar Shmuel, on the bottom of Daf Daled Amud Beis, is going to reformulate Shmuel's position. And in order to understand the reformulation of Shmuel, El Amar Shmuel, let's introduce this with the following point. With regard to Nedarim Bein Adam L'Chavero, there are 2 sides to the coin. There's a neder in which a person generates an Isur on himself, a self-imposed Isur, not to benefit from the mammon of Chavero, of his friend, or not to have any benefit at all from his friend. The other side of the Matbea is when he takes his own mammon and he imposes an Isur neder on his friend, enjoining his friend from having benefit from him or from his possessions. Now, when a person says she'eni ochel lecha, and of course there's a girsa of she'eni with a yud after the aleph, I will not eat from you, then he's accepting upon himself an Isur not to eat from his friend's machal. However, when he says the word mudrani or mudarani, then although that implies that both he himself and his mammon, that's gufi umamoni, are enjoined from having hana from you, from someone else, but then he adds the word mimcha. So he doesn't only say mudrani, but he adds the word mimcha. And the word mimcha, in a sense, expands the scope of his neder to include that he will not benefit neither from gufo shel chavero nor from amono shel chavero. So again, just to review, if he says the word mudrani without mimcha, then he's saying that gufi mamoni mudarim hana mimcha. When he adds the word mimcha, he is including in the neder that he won't benefit neither from the guf of chavero nor the mammon of chavero. Now, what does it mean when he says mudrani and he generates an Isur on his mammon? It doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing as a mammon, as some sort of inanimate possession which would have an Isur hana. Therefore, we have no choice but to assume that his intention was even his friend will not be able to have, he'll be enjoined from having hana from him or from his mammon, meaning mudrani mimcha is a 2-way street. And therefore, based on that, the Gemara reformulates Shmuel. Taima, what did Shmuel mean when he said that he has to add the Amar Shani Ochel L'cha, Shani Toim L'cha? That's only because he wants to create a 2-directional Isur. If he doesn't add the word Shani Ochel L'cha, Shani Toim L'cha, and he only has mudrani mimcha, which Shmuel was saying in such a case is that hudi asur v'chaveru mutar. It's only when he adds shani ochel lecha that's when he's indicating that he wants to generate an Isser on his friend as well. But if he only has Mudrani Mimcha, then there's only an Isser on himself. And now we start today's daf. Daf Hey on the top of the oval. Avol Amar Mudrani Mimcha L'chudei. And again, let's not confuse the word Hemcha with Mimcha. They're both identical. L'chudei, that's all he said. He did not add the word Shani Ochel L'cha, Shani Toim L'cha, then Shneim Asurim. Because the word Mudrani, Himcha, Mudrani itself means both myself and my possessions are in a neder, in an isur, and then when he adds the word Himcha, meaning Mimcha, what he's saying is the opposite, the flip side, that you will not have any hana from me. But if he only says Mudrani Mimcha, I'm sorry, in a case where he says Mudrani Mimcha Sheni Ochel L'cha, then the Sheni Ochel L'cha indicates that the Mudrani was a one-sided, one-way street in which he's prohibiting his friend's goof and moment on himself, and that would be called Hudi Asur V'Chavero Mutter. And that's again when he says Shani Ochel L'cha. But if he leaves out Shani Ochel L'cha and he only has Mudrani L'cha, then he's implying a two-way street. Ki Hadi Omer Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina Mudrani Emcha Shneim Asurim. That both he, the Madir, and the Nidar, the Mudar, are both together also. And the Gemara is going to reject this din that was formulated by Rabbi Yossi based on a Mishnah now that's being quoted from Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis, Tnan, Hareni Olecha Cherem, Hamudar Asur, Avol Madir Lo. You just finished telling me, Rabbi Yossi, that Mudrani Emcha is enough to indicate a two-way street, a reciprocal neder in both directions, but the Mishnah says that Hareni Alecha Cherem, it means that he's only generating an Isser on his friend, but he himself is outside the purview of that Isser. But according to Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina, Mudrani Emcha is a two-way street, Shneim Asurim, neither Ruvain the Madir nor Shimon the Nidar could have Hano one from the other, then the same din should apply in the case where he says, Hareni Alecha Cherem, there should be a two-way Isur, that one is not supposed to have Hana, is not allowed to have Hana from his friend. And yet the Mishnah says that Dafka, the Mudar is also, but the Madir himself is Mutter. He didn't include himself in the Neder. That's against Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina. And when a person says Hareni Alecha Cherem, the implication of his words is that both I and my nechasim will be asur to have hana, and that means that I am asur from, as if it was hegdesh from your nechasim. Because it's not shaykh to say that he meant to impose an Isser on Nichsei Chavero, because there's no such thing as an Isser Neder on Nechasim. Nechasim are not considered B'nei Hana, that you can prohibit the Nechasim from having Hana. It must be, though, he meant to say that he himself will be Asur B'Hana B'nei Chavero. So therefore, the logic of Rabbi Yossi, as it applies to the case of Hareni Alecha Cherem, should lead to the conclusion that both the Mudar and the Madir are Asur, and yet the Mishnah later on says that the Mudar is Asur, but the Madir is Mutter. So in order to justify and reconcile Rabbi Yossi with the Mishnah, the Gemara reinterprets that Mishnah. Kigon de Parish, the case of the Mishnah, the scenario was where when the Noder took the Neder, he added the words V'at alai lo. He explicitly excluded himself from the purview of that Isur Neder. So the Gemara raises the following objection. If a person in the next part of the Mishnah declares at olai cherem, it means he's accepting a cherem and Isur Hano on himself. I know they're asur. Aval lo, aval muder lo, but the muder is not asur. According to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, since in the case of Mudrani and Cha, both of them are asur, it's a two-way street. Then in the case of at olai cherem, it should likewise be a two-way street. And once again, the Gemara is going to push in the same ukimta kigon. It must be a case in that Mishnah, the parish, where the noder added not only at olai cherem, but he added vana olecha lo. I will not generate. I'm not generating an Isur on you as a muder hana. I'm only accepting a neder on myself. So the Gemara rejects this as well, because now the implication is aval stoma. If he only said ani alecha, if he only said ano atalai cherem, but he didn't add the words ano alecha lo shneim asurim, aval stoma mai, what would be the din shneim asurim like Rabbi Yossi? That's impossible. Hamidik tani seifa. The seifa says hareni alecha cherem, the atalai cherem shneim asurim. It's only when he said explicitly that not only is he imposing a cherem on his friend, but his friend is a cherem on him. Only under those circumstances shneim asurim. So the Gemara is medayek. Only in that case, who the shneim asurim ha implication is stama. If he only says harei at olai cherem, but he didn't say the flip side, the at olai. If he only said at olai cherem, but he didn't say ani olecha cherem, hu asur v'chavero mutter. So again, we have a proof from the Mishnah against Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, who said that mudradi v'cha, they're both asur. And based on this question from the Mishnah later on, the Gemara now is going to reformulate the din of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. We'll see soon that that's not going to help Shmuel, but at least to make some sense out of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina's statement, Elahachi Itmar, this is what Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina ruled. If a person says to his friend, Mudar ani lecha shneim asurim, because he add the word lecha, when he adds the word lecha, it has an additional meaning of gama oscha. In other words, not only a my mudar, that would be mudar ani without the word lecha, but lecha implicates oscha. In other words, I'm being madir I'm being madir you from getting any benefit from my nechasim. And mishalcha, on the other side, I'm not going to get any benefit from your nechasim. But if he says mudrani himcha, if he only says the word mudrani himcha, but he doesn't add the word licha, which means oscha, then mudrani himcha means that he's pulling himself away from any benefit from his friend, who asur v'chavero mutter. So the Gemara is not happy with this reformulation of Rabbi Yossi either. Why? Because although you may have defended Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, but we still have the kasha that we raised the objection against Shmuel. V'hamasnisan de katani, the Mishnah says mudrani heimcha, which means vimcha, as we said over and over again. And he didn't say the word lecha. He didn't say mudrani lecha. He said hemcha. And yet, v'ukimta masnisan de Shmuel. Shmuel interpreted the Mishnah, as we said earlier, bekulon, in all these lashonos of mudrani, mufrashni, muchachni. Only the no there is awesome, but the mudar is mutter. Ad sheyomar shani toim lecha v'shani ochel lecha. If he did not add those words to qualify, or shall we say, magnify his original statement of Mudrani, then Hudi Asur, he's enjoining himself from having benefit from his friend, Vechavero Mutter. But it's not a two-way street. Avo b'Mudrani hemcha, if he only says the word Mudrani, but if he says Mudrani himcha, and he doesn't add the word Shani Toim L'cha v'Shani Ochel L'cha, we derived in our reinterpretation, our reformulation of Shmuel that Shneim Asurim. And that's against what we proved from the Mishnah with regard to Cherem, that when he says Mimcha, without adding Shani Ochel L'cha, then there's only a one-way Isur, in which the Madir is also, the Mudar is Mutter. So we still have a Pircha from the Mishnah against Shmuel. Ella, says the Gemara, we have to reformulate Shmuel. Meikara, the Shmuel, Hachi Yitmar. What Shmuel originally ruled was the following. Taima, what is the reason that the Noder is only Asur B'Achila, but there's no Isur Hana? The Omar, he added Shani Ochel L'cha, Shani Toim L'cha, in which case he restricted the scope of the Isur of Mudrani Mimcha to Achila. Hu di ein hu Asur B'Achila, and therefore the Isur Neder is limited to Achila. But if he says Mudrani Mimcha Stam, without qualifying it with the word Shani Ochel L'cha, Asur Afilu B'Hana, the Gemara rejects this as well. If that's what Shmuel had in mind, that once he adds the word Shani Ochel L'cha, he restricts the scope of his neder, and he's not Asur B'Hana, he's only Asur B'Achila, is Lema Shmuel Hachi. Shmuel should have formulated in the following words. He should have said, V'im lo Omar, if he didn't say Shani Ochel L'cha, Shani Toim L'cha, is Asur Afilu B'Hana. Shmuel didn't mention a word about expanding the scope of the neder to include an Isur Hana. Why didn't Shmuel say B'kulan ad sheyomer v'ani ochel l'cha? Why did Shmuel say B'kulan ad sheyomer shani ochel l'cha, which is mashma that if he didn't say so, he's not Asur at all. Whereas now we're interpreting it as if Shmuel says if he didn't add shani ochel l'cha, then the Isur is expanded to include even Hana. Now we get to the final conclusion of this sugya in terms of Shmuel, in which we go back to the original understanding of Shmuel, and we're going to contend with the kasha that we had on the original formulation. Taima, the reason why Mudrani Mimcha is Asur at all is the Omar Shani Ochel L'cha Shani Toim L'cha, who the Asur. Aval Omar Mudrani Mimcha, we don't know what the words Mudrani Mimcha mean. Lo mashma, it doesn't have the definite implication. We're not definite about it. The Omar Asur, that he won't have any Hana from his friend. My taima, we could reinterpret Mudrani Mimcha if he didn't add the word Shani Ochel L'cha. Mudrani Mimcha means Lo Mishta'inu B'Adach, I won't speak to you. So it doesn't mean that I won't get any benefit from you. Lo ahana mimcha, because it's very possible that what he meant to say was lo adaber mimcha, I won't speak to you. And when he says mufrashni mimcha, it doesn't necessarily mean that he won't have any hana from his friend, but rather it might mean lo avidna imcha masnu matmash. It only means I won't have any business dealings with you. Not that I'm accepting upon myself an all-encompassing, all-inclusive Isur Hana from you. I can interpret lo kamimda the arba amos diloch mashma. I don't want to come within 4 amos of you. I won't come close to you. So since it doesn't necessarily mean that his kavana was to generate an Isur on himself, not to have any anah from his friend, therefore, no matter what he himself had in mind, that he wanted to accept upon himself an Isur anah, the neder is not chal. Because with regard to Nedarim, we have halach of hafla asper, and it doesn't depend upon what he intended, but rather the meaning of his words. Now, in effect, the Gemara now is going back to its original interpretation of Shmuel, in which the Gemara understood that Mudrani Mimcha in and of itself does not have a power to generate an Isur. But what's different now is that the Gemara is introducing the concept of Yodayim, of Yodos Nedarim. And what the Gemara is saying is that since Mudrani Mimcha has two interpretations, as does Mufrashi Mimcha and Meruchakti Mimcha, therefore it's not even a Yad She'ena Mofiyah. It's one notch lower. It's not B'toras Yodayim at all. It's not even Yodayim She'ena Mofiyah, because we have three levels. We have Yodayim Mochichos, we have Yodayim She'ena Mochichos, which is still a Yad, and it's going to be Machlokas Tanoim. And then we have something lower than that, which is not even a Yad She'ena Mochiach. It's just a Miktas Dibur. A Yad has to be a Dibur that we understand from the Dibur what he has in mind. But in these cases of Mudranim, etc., we don't even have a Miktas Dibur. We don't even have a Remez that he meant to take upon himself a Neder. So it's not a Neder at all. So when the Gemara originally rejected Shmuel based on the Braisos, and they proved that Mudrani is considered a Yad, now the Gemara is saying that since we don't really know, we cannot determine from his Lashon what he had in mind, whether he had an Isur Hanoah from his friend or an Isur Dibur with his friend, then you could say that's Yodayim She'ena Mochichos, but Shmuel says, no, this has no hochach at all. It doesn't have any, there's no hachra one way or the other. And if you can't be machriya, then it's not Yodayim. We asked the kasha from the Braisos and Mudrani Mimcha is Asur. Okay, that's a different sheet of Tanoim. That's already going with the sheet of Tanoim that even a Yad She'ena Mochiach is considered a Yad. Shmuel rejects that sheet and holds like the other Tana who maintains that Yodayim She'ena Mochichos, if you can't prove it from his language that he means an Isur, it's not a Yad at all. Shmuel has the right to paskin like that Mandi Omar, that if there's no hochacha in the Lashon and it's Eina Mochiach Klal, then it's not a Yad at all.